So, hello everybody. Economia Publishing, the group of Economia, welcomes everybody to this midday discussion on enhancing cooperation between Homeland and Diaspora, an event occurring within the Delphi Economic Forum effort to open up the discussion from Greece. Of course, Delphi Economic Forum happens this time in a very weird way, meaning through e-discussion, and it is in that way that we are greeting George Prevelackis, Papastергιάδης, and Endis for a discussion of a matter which is dear to our heart at Economia, meaning the relationship between Homeland, Greece, and its diaspora. We have been dealing with this matter since a long time, since at least the last 20 years in a more organized way with our publication called Business File, and through books that we publish, which makes me greet especially George Prevelackis, Professor Emeritus at the Sorbonne University in Paris, who is also permanent representative of Greece at the ESD, and most importantly to me today, an author of two books that we have put out. The first one has to do with who are we Greeks, ποιοι είμαστε ελληνικά, who are we in English, and the forthcoming book, which has been published in Greek, Xylina Tichi, the wooden walls, the wooden ramparts, the way in which the ancient Greeks, ancient Athenians, have fought through maritime supremacy. Then Bill Papastергιάδης, managing partner of Moray and Agnew Lawyers in Australia, and to top it up, Endis Emenidis, executive director of the Hellenic American Leadership Council at the USA. So we have from the three parts of the Greek diaspora participants, from Europe, from down under, from Australia, and from the States, who were going to put bread on our table in an overall discussion. I would like the three of them to give an opening statement, a brief, a short, a well-organized opening statement to the rather simplistic question. Everything changes, especially after the coronavirus pandemic. Everything changes. How far has this new era, this new age starting under duress, influencing the relationship of Greece, of the homeland, with its diaspora? Γιώργος Πρεβελάκης, shoot first.
Well, the first answer is, of course, that the fact that the Greek state managed quite well this new challenge, and therefore the image of Greece has been enhanced, is a positive fact, because the Greek diaspora can feel proud about Greece, and this is very important for the Greeks that live outside Greece and who have to take care of the relationship with their environment. They had suffered a lot because of the bad image of Greece during the crisis. So now we breathe. We feel that we can also participate to a positive image. Now, more generally, I would say that we are, before the crisis, we felt that we are at a historical crossroads, that the world is changing. Those changes will influence a lot the whole network of relationships between various parts of, I would say, what I call the Hellenosphere, because this division between the Greek state and diaspora seems to me a bit too artificial. So all this network of the Greek world in Greece and in the global sphere is going to change to adapt to a changing world. And this is why I tried to get into this debate through especially the second book that you mentioned, which the subtitle is The Geopolitics of the Greek Networks, to show the fact that this Greek world is a very complex world. It's a world which functions in a polycentric way, in a very dynamic way, and therefore it is adapted to the way that the whole world is moving away from the system based essentially on nation states. So in that sense...
I'll go back to that in more detail, because this is a major point of all of your books and your public discourse. But let me now toss the ball over to the other side of the world, to Bill Papasteriadis. Would he join in this kind of, let's say, optimism and positive feelings about Greece and the relationship of the diaspora to Greece after the COVID pandemic?
Absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity to converse with all of the people from around the world. And I should also add that I'm predominantly here as the president of the Greek community of Melbourne, the third largest Greek-speaking city globally, and also perhaps one of the most dynamic communities globally as well. But I think, Andoni, there are four issues for us to consider going forward in terms of a diaspora. I mean, what is the current state of our diaspora here? What's the current makeup of our diaspora here in Australia? Is it a good time for us to further that relationship with our homeland? And how is the diaspora dealing with that relationship? And what are the impediments, if any? Because up until the economic crisis, it was considered that in Australia, we were in a decline from a numeracy perspective and a cultural perspective because of the fact that the last generation of migrants had stopped coming largely at the time of the end of the junta. And as a result of the economic crisis, we've seen, as a result of some estimates by people like Dr. Thomas, that up to 90,000 people have migrated back from Greece to Australia, many of whom had dual citizenship. Now, what that means also is that the makeup of our community and our diaspora here has changed enormously, because the people that have come across are predominantly middle-class people, educated, whether it's in trades or in business, commerce or the arts, as opposed to the first generation when the major immigration movement took place in the 50s and 60s, 86% barely finished primary school, coupled with the fact that we now have a skills acquisition and also a work evolution from the children of the first immigrants to this country, who are also reaching the upper echelons of business and trade and commerce and the arts. Our diaspora is no longer homogenous. The brotherhoods that were established by our parents are slowly ceding away from lack of involvement. Those people, unfortunately, are passing away. We don't have a homogenous diaspora here, which calls for the need for an inquiry about what does a diaspora mean. And in particular, the way we see our homeland has also changed, because we no longer relate to it the way our parents did, from a melancholy story of loss and decay. We now see it as an understanding of the recognition of the cultural differences. But I can say, Andoni, to what you've just indicated, now is the time to further that relationship, because in Australia, our politicians and policymakers understand that the Greek diaspora is good for business. We've integrated from every perspective in life, and they fund our cultural and social and educational programs. Just to give you some small examples.
A positive evolution, but creating new issues, probably also new problems of communications. Would you say that? Would you go along with this kind of statement?
Sorry, Andoni, what do you mean exactly?
I mean that you have a diaspora consisting of a far more promising population, but far more intricate to approach, both from the homeland and from your side of organizing the diaspora and its role.
Absolutely. And it takes all of us a little bit to imagine what this diaspora means, because what we can do, and I can talk to us as the president of the Greek community of Melbourne about what we've done in the last few years to imagine what the diaspora can be. And at the same time, this will enable Greece to understand what is it that drives our interests here. We initiated the tourist working visa arrangement between Greece and Australia, which was non-existent. We set up a trade commission with the government here in Melbourne to go to Greece in September with 100 businessmen for the Thessaloniki Fair. That may not happen because of COVID. There was funding for our festival, which I can show everyone, which attracts 100,000 people. And I can just show an image here of the festival.
Wow.
We get 100,000 people there every year to the festival that organised by the Greek community of Melbourne. The government funds us $600,000 over a number of years. They also helped fund, and I'll show the 15-storey cultural centre built by the Greek community of Melbourne.
You are making your point in a very eloquent way.
Which is, we need to imagine how it is.
I would tend to say that you are doing a campaign now. Yeah.
No, not necessarily. What I'm saying is, what we're doing now is to give you examples of our cultural product here, which is relevant to Australia, which is relevant to our diaspora, which has engaged our government. The time has now become to engage the Greek government in this discourse. And that's really the point that I'm trying to emphasise by making those problems. And there are, Andoni, there are plenty of impediments in front of us in that journey.
Right. So let me shift now to Endis Emenidis. Again, shifting 2 or 3 oceans to reach the focal point of the traditional way in which Greeks tend to look at their diaspora. How far would you concur with either Prevελάκης or Papastεργιάδης seen from an American point of view?
Have an opportunity here. I want to take it a step further. I think the situation has more potential than anybody is even anticipating right now. Can you hear me? Because my son just
yes,
went
indeed.
Out. Okay.
No, you're on.
Okay. So what we've learned from the COVID crisis, as we've learned from some of the previous financial crises, is that there is no over there anymore. And in fact, here in the United States, the way we handled it, where there's great dissatisfaction with all levels of government, and the diaspora gets to contrast that with how Greece has handled it. It's amazing because for the first time as a diaspora, we turn to our brothers and sisters here in the United States and say, look at Greece as an example. And we're not alone in saying that. Yesterday, Mayor Mike Bloomberg said it during an hour session with Prime Minister Mitsotakis. Fareed Zakaria said it on Sunday during his interview with Prime Minister Mitsotakis. Brookings Institution said it a month ago. So it's when we look at it, and for so long we thought, okay, we're in the United States and we're so far further ahead of Greece. And now you look at Greece as an example. And when you've heard you've heard the rhetoric from the beginning of the recovery under the Tsipras government, you heard the rhetoric of Greece is back, and you heard it again when Prime Minister Mitsotakis came to Washington this January. You keep hearing Greece is back, but now you look. You're a businessman. When we were talking about the change in the diaspora and a new diaspora and a more diverse and in some ways complicated to coordinate, but you have in the generation, the children and grandchildren of immigrants who are now vice presidents and CEOs of major international companies. And now they look at Greece and they say, man, that is a modern, administrative, Western state. I got a lot of feedback yesterday after Prime Minister Mitsotakis' presentation in Bloomberg, on Bloomberg, where they said, I would like to invest in an economy headed by this guy. The fact that Chodras was the one, let's contrast even how we handled the coronavirus. Chodras was the one doing the daily briefings all the time. Fauci has disappeared here since April. Greece has inspired a lot of confidence among diaspora, and among the diaspora, second and third generation especially, people who only knew Greece as part of their heritage, maybe vacationed in Greece. But these are people who, for a living, invest internationally. And I think they're going to take a fresh look in Greece. And I really don't think in Greece anyone understands the potential of this moment.
Andy, I have already a question raised by somebody in the audience. Yeah. How widespread is this feeling in the American diaspora? Is it a leadership phenomenon or a grassroots phenomenon to this kind of regaining confidence and relishing in the newfound positive image of Greece?
So, I'm going to kind of disagree with the premise of the question, because we tend to look at the diaspora as a singular group. And I think there's multiple groups in the Greek American diaspora. There's those who, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, those who, for example, are going to be allowed to vote. There's the first generation, there's a second, the third generation. There's people who only consider themselves Greek because of their membership or stewardship in the Greek Orthodox Church. And then there's people who remember that their papu or great-grandfather was from Greece. So for the people who are paying attention, what I described is absolutely true. They're very proud, and they have a renewed confidence in Greece. For the people who are starting to pay attention, and they're basically getting to reverse the feelings and what they learned, the impressions that they got from 2010 to 2015. And we cannot emphasize that enough. If you were, especially for those who don't speak Greek, and I hope we get to that a little later, the English language product that you were getting, the English language reporting that you were getting on Greece was just overwhelmingly negative. You couldn't find a positive story about Greece. Now it's the opposite. I cannot remember, and I do this for a living, I cannot remember a prime minister of Greece being a staple on American mass media, but he is, and it's always in a very positive light. Again, I gave you 3 examples in just the last month. He had a major address at the Brookings Institution, he had a major address on Bloomberg, 1 hour. He had Fareed Zakaria, I think, twice. He spoke at the American Jewish Committee's Global Forum virtually. He's reaching an American audience in a very expert way, and frankly, in more fluent and articulate English than the President of the United States.
So since we are in a rather upbeat mood, I would tend to shift to George Prevellakis to pick out of his first comments one word, or let's say one environment. He told us that we are in a network era, and we have the possibility through technology to organize networks of scientists, because Greece is a country out of which many scientists have come, many researchers all around the world, networks of people in business, networks in shipping. Is this new network era more promising than the earlier ones in dealing with this effort to enhance the cooperation between the diaspora and the homeland? And in which ways, in fact?
Well, my hypothesis is that as a culture, as a Greek culture, we are much more adapted to a network world. A network world was the world of the empires, was the world in which the Greeks were playing a very important role. However, the model, the European territorial model, became predominant, and we had to adapt to it. So we have moved into this kind of not only of geopolitical organization, but also this kind of state of mind, of seeing the world through the perspective of the territory, of the nation, of the state. And this, of course, influences also the way that we see our presence abroad. We used to employ the word Greeks abroad. This is a vision that comes from this framework of the state, and some people that happen to be outside the state, they are an exception, they are something which should either disappear or they should return. Now what is happening is that this era during which the form of organization of the nation state, of the territorial nation state, where those three things coincide, territory, nation, and state, well, this era is little by little going away. It will not change, the world will not change completely, but we see the return of the networks. And I believe that in this new world, our cultural heritage gives us extraordinary assets to have an influence much larger than the small influence of a small state in the south of the Balkans. But this means that we have to change also our vision of ourselves. And this is something which in diaspora is happening. What we heard before shows that we start in the diaspora to realize that we are a diverse community, complex community, dynamic, polycentric. We have all those characteristics that are adapted to the new world. I think that we have to make a big effort, intellectual effort in Greece in order to start perceiving ourselves not as simply as a state and some extensions outside, but rather as a global network, part of which is the Greek state, and which is interacting, which the elements of this network are interacting among themselves in a very complex way, not in the usual way where the interaction is essentially between the center and various peripheries, and when the communities of the diasporas are perceived as if they were municipalities depending on the state, but rather as a system which is much more chaotic in a certain way. It has its own way of organizing itself. They have introduced, scholars have introduced the term of chaotic, speaking about diasporas, with a much bigger potential. But in order to capture this potential, we really have to make a big intellectual effort in order to understand. And also the Greek state and the elements of the Greek society also have to overcome not only stereotypes, but also a certain, I would say, arrogant attitude. They have to understand that this dynamic global network, which is connected with whatever is more advanced in the world, cannot be submitted to a kind of a leadership from a state, from a center, which, in spite of the extraordinary progress that has been made during the last months, is not the pioneer of global progress.
A double-barreled question now to Bill Papasteriadis. This kind of disaffection that used to happen between the homeland and the diaspora, or rather between the diaspora and the homeland under the financial and economic crisis, could it be overcome, to your feeling, through this working of networks? Or, and this is the second aspect of the question, or do you think that the legislative change, giving the vote to Greeks abroad, will contribute more, seen from Australia, in either a symbolic or a real-time importance? Bill.
Two excellent questions, Andoni. Two excellent questions. Taking the point that George was making, Giorgos was making a little bit further, there's no doubt that the recent migration patterns that we saw post-Second World War globally from Greece was basically a form of ethno-diaspora, where they took their seeds from Greece, planted them where they were, felt some level of distrust in the new homeland where they were, and tried to re-employ their understandings of the world from their homeland. We're now seeing, and taking this a little bit more forward from what Γιώργος was saying, a form of digital diaspora, where the connection is no longer through the organised form of community groups somewhat, but is done through a digital form whereby people are now conversing with one another in so many different other places other than with their homeland Greece, because you might find that I have a lot more in common with Andy in Chicago and with other colleagues in South Africa than I might have with someone in Thessaloniki. So that's one issue. I think the other issue that you raise, and which is particularly pertinent, Andoni, it goes to the issue about what role does the state play, and can the state play a pivotal role in terms of empowering the diaspora? We have seen massive efforts by the Greek government historically to assist the diaspora. They set up the organisation called the World Council of Hellenes Abroad, SAER. They've set up an interparliamentary association as well. Equally, they've got the General Secretariat of the Greeks Abroad. Now, on the whole, it's arguable that many of these organisations didn't ultimately achieve the outcome they did. They weren't flexible, they weren't robust, and perhaps they didn't have the appropriate connection to the parts of the world that they wanted to speak to, and which goes back to the issue about homogeneity and the fact that we are so different in so many different places. So we now need to reimagine another new world. And part of that involves also understanding who we are. One of the things that we've done in Melbourne is to convince the federal government to fund, at the University of Melbourne, through the Greek community of Melbourne, a Hellenic chair in global diaspora. In other words, for us to be the think tank for the fact that 40% of Hellenes live outside of the Greek borders. That research needs to be done for us to understand how the institutions talk to us, how we talk back to them, and then taking us to the next point, which is the symbolic issue, as you put it, relating to voting. Now, we met with Mitsotakis, Prime Minister Mitsotakis, and with the Interior Affairs Minister Theodorikakos, both exemplary gentlemen who explained to us in the middle of last year, in our meeting with them, that this was a pivotal issue for them, that they needed to get a bill passed so as to connect the diaspora. True to their word, they achieved that. But at the same time, knowing the difficulties involved in getting cross-party support for a bill like that, because they needed 200 votes, it has been admitted by the Prime Minister and also the Interior Minister that there are many weaknesses associated with the bill that was passed. And unfortunately, we will see, as a result of this very important step, that I think will gather enormous long-term credit with the diaspora. Short-term, we're going to see that maybe 70 or 80% of us in the diaspora will be unable to vote because of the fact that we've been outside of Greece for 35 years and didn't live there for 2 years, and equally by the fact that postal votes or electronic voting is not allowed, that you have to vote in the consulate. Now, it raises the question, and this is something for all of us that we need to discuss. Why is it that Greece, and why is it that some political parties foisted a requirement, as I've indicated before, when you would have thought you're either a citizen or you're not, you're either on the electoral roll or you're not? Why create all these further obstacles for what we consider to be, in my humble opinion, because we did lobby quite hard on this point, that we need to dispel the fear that Greeks abroad will control the fate of Greece, that we need to open the door to a positive engagement between the diaspora and the Greek state. More importantly, because as we know, during the economic crisis, 500,000 Greeks left the Greek country, the Greek borders. All of them have got ties back to Greece. All of them either got family, assets, relationships, whatnot. Yet these people were denied the opportunity to participate in a very open democratic right that Greece was the founder of. And in particular, I'd like to add that from our perspective, what does the vote do? The vote will, in my opinion, force the Greek government and the Greek state to pay a lot more attention towards the diaspora. It will focus their minds on the issues that hopefully we will discuss the impediments that do exist, because we've had a very positive discussion up until this point in time about the future, and I think the future is bright, but there are many impediments. But I believe by casting the vote abroad, dispersing the seed the way they have, it will force the Greek government for the first time to consider how it will navigate dealing with the issues that the diaspora has, and to also make the politicians accountable. Because I don't think any of us believe that the diaspora has an insufficient view of what happens in Greece.
Bill, before I go over with the same question to Andy, very briefly, would you say that you are disappointed because the initial project of giving the vote has been watered down? Or would you say that there is a bitterness that too few people are going to be able to vote? Which side, which color of this argument would you use?
I would actually take the argument, Andoni, that this is an incredible step in the right direction by a government which has succeeded where many other governments have failed decades before. It will not achieve the outcome that they would like it to, or perhaps they envisaged, but it is a positive step forward for all of us, which I believe will have significant repercussions globally for the diaspora.
Andy, same question to you, but associated with a follow-up, an internal follow-up. You have second generation, third generation, fourth generation Greeks in the States. And you also, on yourself, you put it the multiplicity of angles in which we should look at the diaspora. Does this discussion resonate totally differently to each generation of Greek Americans? Is the notion even of the vote, not the possibility to vote, but the notion of starting the trek to political participation of interest to earlier generations or to later generations?
Well, I think the issue of the vote appeals to the earlier generations and those with more direct ties to Greece. That doesn't diminish the significance of this development, but it is narrow. And I think one of the dangers in Athens, in Greece, is to overestimate, even if there were no restrictions, not to overestimate, or even if they're not the restrictions that Bill talked about before, not to overestimate what the vote was going to do. Just like there was an overestimation of what SAE was going to do. And SAE, I think, here in the United States was an abysmal failure. It was very limited in scope of who it reached out to. And that's why you're not seeing any clamoring. Multiple governments wanted to bring SAE back. And there was, in the newer generations, there was no, who cares? There was no interest. But the vote was a must for many reasons. One, there are people who left after the crisis. We have to keep them politically enfranchised in Greece. If they're going to get back to Greece, if we're going to reverse the brain drain, these are people who cannot be politically disenfranchised. We have to keep the ties for those Greeks who could return. Even as a symbolic measure, even for those who don't get the vote, the fact that people around them are going to be more engaged, that there is going to be more information flowing in, that there are going to be Greek politicians even coming here seeking support, that's going to have a positive spillover effect in creating direct ties. But we do have to strike a note of caution. I mean, I'm seeing it already, that there are certain people, certain elected officials in Greece who think that there's a treasure trove of votes here. And they're going to come here and treat this as an electoral constituency. And if we're going to base the relations of the diaspora and Greece on the vote, we're going to be very disappointed on both ends.
So your advice would not be to board planes and to come over and do campaigning in the States in the hope that the final result of the elections in Greece would be reversed through the diaspora. You feel it would be disingenuous to hope that?
Well, first of all, it'd be amazing to see how they could even identify who is able to vote. But the bigger risk is, and you started it off with the second and third generation. You know, these people, they're not eligible because of the 35 years and the 2 years and any of those requirements. They're not even citizens, right? So that's the vast majority of the diaspora, So if you're going to base your engagement with the diaspora on, attracting a minority, you risk the way you've disenfranchised people who could vote and not letting them vote, you risk disenfranchising the people who can't even vote. Right? They don't even have a passport. Now, there are some people who say, well, those aren't, there are people who say those people have no stake in the game. As I like to tell people, we're coming up on the bicentennial in Greece, and we know the role that the Philikea played, and they were not Greek citizens, and they weren't voting. Of course, nobody was voting in Greece at that point. But the vote is very important, but it's important for a segment of the diaspora. So let's not make that the end all and be all. There are many, many, many strategies, and we can get to all of them. I think we can, as we do in a multiple choice exam, there's option A and option B and option C, and option D is all of the above, right? Option A is the vote. It's one of them, but we have to get to option D, all of the above strategy.
Before leaving the States to go back to Australia, a more pointed question about what does constitute a Greek? Among other things, the Greek language. How well organized is the access to the Greek language to a Greek American of the third generation? And how could this be ameliorated?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most underrated questions. Of course, even this discussion, we have to do it in English to reach a broader audience. But the Greek language is something that has unified the diaspora. There's been a diaspora ever since there's been a Greece, ever since there's been city-states. And the Greek language has been a constant. I just referred to the Philikea. Their work on the language was absolutely groundbreaking across Europe. There's a model that's shifting, the traditional model. My parents were both immigrants, so I went to a 3-day-a-week Greek school and then a Saturday Greek school. That was an easy system because we knew and they knew that we spoke Greek at home too, but that's not the case. We have 8 out of 10 marriages, even in the Greek Orthodox Church, are of Greeks with non-Greeks. So you can imagine those who are not getting married in the Greek Orthodox Church are definitely not. So Greek is not spoken at home with the same frequency as it was. So that model of the Saturday Greek school is just not as effective as it used to be. Fortunately, we're seeing some experimentation. There's a program right now, Sta Elinika. It's an app that's being developed out of the Niarchos Modern Greek Studies program over at Simon Fraser Institute, with the endorsement of the Greek Foreign Ministry and the Greek Education Ministry. There are, and I'd like to get into this more specifically later, but there are study abroad programs that we're not taking advantage of. And I'll tell you what, if somebody studies abroad for 6 months or a year in Greece, they're going to come back with the Greek language. There are things that are very prominent in the United States that we have not fully taken advantage of. Here in the US, because you increasingly have 2 working parents, daycares and pre-Ks, special programs, especially during those years, are something that American families are willing to pay a lot of money for. And this is, I can say, because I put my children through it, their first 2 years of school were in full-time Greek language programs, right? That's something that we can do more of. And if we give people that foundation, then maybe a Saturday program works. Then maybe summer camps in Greece, immersion camps. There's a lot of stuff in that people are taking advantage of in the American system, but people are sending, I have two neighbors who are Greek who are sending their kids to immersion French camps because they can't find an immersion Greek camp. And I think this is something that we have to put it back at the top of the agenda. We don't one size fits all. There are many, many programs, and really the crown jewel should be a study in Greece program for 3 months, 6 months, or a year.
Same question to Papastεργιάδης down under. How does this resonate to an Australian Greek?
Language for me is the cornerstone to our culture and heritage. And it's a pivotal part of the Greek community of Melbourne, our organisation, whereby 60 to 70% of our efforts are garnered towards ensuring the preservation of language, either through the government schools that we lobby very hard to ensure that they continue to offer Greek as a subject in the course of their general English programs, or through the Immerisia Scholia, that is the schools that the Greek community of Melbourne has set up or the Archdiocese have set up, which are embedded with Greek within the curriculum. At the same time, what we've seen is that if you build it, they will come. So what we have done is we have been examining census studies that are produced by the Australian government, which detail where people are living going forward within our city, our state and our country. And we're observing where the Greeks are now moving to, and we're building Greek schools there, and we're offering Greek languages there. So in other words, we're taking the afternoon and the Saturday schools to them. But equally at the same time, we found as part of the economic crisis in Greece that there was a massive influx, as I've indicated before, of Greek residents to Australia. That the children of these Greek residents weren't going to the Greek schools that my children were attending, because obviously the Greek of my children is at a far lower level than from kids from Greece. What we did, we lobbied our government and we said to them, we're introducing a curriculum with teachers, etc., that will be at an advanced level for them. And they're funding that. The Victorian government here in Melbourne funded that, as well as funding the Hellenic Chair in Global Studies of the Greek community of Melbourne, as I've indicated before, as well as now we've reintroduced ancient Greek as part of our curriculum too through the Greek community of Melbourne. So, and not only that, but setting up theatre groups, music groups, dance groups, introducing language through, and also film groups. So we run a major film festival every year in Melbourne and in Sydney and all the major cities. As part of that film festival, we require each Greek school and each class in each Greek school on a particular topic to do a 5-minute film. And we then feature the best films at the film festival and award them. So there are so many different ways that we can communicate our language. We are certainly in need of a coherent program with Greece, as indicated by ND, by way of an immersion program or relationships with universities, which unfortunately at this moment don't exist. It's too hard for, unfortunately, the Greek universities, because I'm seeing all of our tertiary graduates migrating to Europe and studying in France, Belgium, Norway, everywhere, but not Greece. Something that we're keen to explore, and we do need the support for these summer camps and also the tertiary relationships to ensure, and also the development of books that are specific to our cultural background in a diaspora as well, through one of the universities that I used to know that Crete used to run, and that needs to be developed even further. So there's a lot more work to be done, but I'm certainly positive about the retention of the Greek language.
Well, now, to shift to Giorgos Prevellakis, some time ago, maybe some years ago, I believe we both participated in a discussion on a panel where the topic was the well-known brain drain problem phenomenon, which everybody at that time seemed to be deploring or even mourning. And I would like to put the question to him in a different way. is this fact that conditions, practical conditions, the crisis years, shifted massively promising parts of the Greek population abroad, mainly towards Europe, but also to the States or to Oceania. Is this part of life, because it's part of our life, really unilaterally a bad thing, or has it enhanced the existence and the seal of Greece abroad, and maybe empowered this feeling of community through e-connections, through building new networks? Has it possibly and probably enhanced our status abroad? How have you lived in the center of Europe, close to the center of Europe, this experience, Giorgos?
That this reaction of shock because of the exodus of a lot of people, of course, it can be explained, first of all, because of the family ties, and then because of this vision of a territory, as if, the Greek world was essentially organized inside the territory, and that we should not lose any kind of resource of minds outside. But the world is moving away from this model. As I said, we are more and more into a network logic. What does it mean, a network logic? It means, first of all, the obvious that now we have the possibility to communicate. We are not in the era when somebody left for the United States and returned 10 years later and sent a few letters with a few dollars to his family. If I take my example, we live in Paris with my wife. We have one son in Boston and another in Belgrade. And we are in contact constantly. Before the coronavirus, we were traveling all the time. So it's not that there is a kind of a border between Greece and the outside world. The other issue, the other positive issue about this kind of movement, there are many. First of all, what you mentioned, that this has reinforced and rejuvenated the Greek diaspora. But also, I think that the main problem of Greece is that it is introvert, that it is looking inside, and this we could analyze it. It would be another debate. So this is our main handicap as a country, and it's obvious that the government of Mitsotakis is aware of that, and this is why they are trying to open up. Now, the fact that so many young Greeks went abroad is a way of connecting with the world. They are going outside, they are seeing what's happening outside the world. This changes their perceptions, changes their vision. Some may come back, they may move away again. It creates a linkage. And of course, it can be a factor, an extraordinary factor of technological innovation. And in that sense, well, it is well known, the model of Israel, how Israel has managed to move into technological innovation exactly by creating bridges between Israelis or Jews that are inside Israel, outside Israel, going back and forth. This is the world in which we are moving, and whatever helps Greece get away from this kind of logic of borders, of closure, of introversion, I think it's very positive.
Well, now, as we are nearing our debate, our E-round table, should I say, I would do something that is typically Greek. Most Greeks, at one or other times in their lives, they say, "Αν ήμουν πρωθυπουργός." It's the ideal of every Greek to influence the thinking of the rulers of the country, maybe of the world too. But "Αν ήμουν πρωθυπουργός," I would like to ask each and every of you to, in 2 minutes, give not some sort of advice, but the main focus of his thinking about influencing Greece from, okay, not abroad, but from the point of view of the diaspora. And since I'm also participating in the debate, I will open this risky business by saying that if I were to do this kind of giving advice to the Prime Minister, to whichever Prime Minister, not necessarily the sitting one, would be to say, keep your eyes open to the diaspora, comma, in an earnest and open way, which is a very general way of giving advice and a very safe one. But over to Papastεργιάδης. What would you say to the Prime Minister?
Well, Andoni, I should say that here in Melbourne and in Australia, that if you said Sikul Proedre, you'd probably find the whole Kafenio standing up, so that everyone here is a Prime Minister or President, and everyone's got an opinion, so there are many of them. My focus would be following what Γιώργος said about the fact that we need to be open to the world. That's the first point. The second point is to be also a pluralistic and multicultural society that is open to other ideas and to other cultures. We have learned so much in our country from the fact that we empower other people from different backgrounds to express themselves without fear that you're minimizing or reducing the whole. In fact, we're creating a bigger whole out of greater involvement and participation by all of us. And I think opening up Greece to a progressive view and an open view of the world is a good starting point. At the same time, it requires significant effect on its bureaucratic structures and its capacity to effectively and efficiently make decisions. Time and time again, great proposals are put to the Greek government. We've put proposals to set up Enterprise Greece office here, or EOT, etc., double taxation, all sorts of other issues, attaches to consulates. They're endorsed, they're appreciated, they're not acted upon. So I would encourage Greece to, as it does to tourism, to open its borders, but also to open its mind to the broad multicultural world that we live in, and to embrace, as you've indicated, a pluralistic, open view of the world, such that it becomes a citizen of the world, as we in the diaspora have become citizens of the world.
Andy, your take on that? Your advice?
You know, I have three specific pieces of advice, and to be fair, I think the government is already moving in that direction, but I would put it on fast forward, because I think, like I said before, we have an unbelievable moment in time and we don't fully realize the potential. First, I would prioritize as a matter of national policy getting Greek Americans to study abroad. In full disclosure, I'm a product of such study abroad, and I'm also on the board of College Year in Athens. And as I told Mr. Philachtopoulos way before I joined the board, I credit my parents and I credit College Year in Athens for how Greek I became. If I could go through my bookshelf, back there, I could show you all the books that I learned from studying in Greece. And Greece, if I never went again in the summer, is paradise to me, because I lived from January to May in Greece. But it's sad that at a time when Greek Americans are studying abroad in unprecedented numbers, only 10% of the American students coming to Greece are of Greek descent. Every Greek group, every community, every organization should be prioritizing sending at least one of their children to Greece to study abroad, whether it's on a college program or a gap year high school program. Two, a more concerted effort to identify the talent, the young talent, that are Greek citizens here, to get them to move back. Reversing the brain drain is not something that's going to happen just on mega trends. There are certain people that you got to get trendsetters and bring them back. And I talk to these people, and they're intent on making, achieving some sort of success in the U.S. Well, if they achieve too much success in the U.S., they never get back. Find that talent and get them to bring back. And then three, which is something that the Prime Minister alluded to yesterday on Bloomberg, but it's really going to be a staple of the COVID world, right? We've proven the concept of working from home. We've proven the concept of working from everywhere. The office real estate market here in the U.S. could collapse because people are not, every proposal is like cities are going to become less dense. People are not going to be going to the office anymore. People are going to be allowed to work from all over the world. There are certain industries. We have Greek Americans who, for example, are leading in the renewable energy industry, in the tech industry. How do we get them to come and work a part of the year or to set up some type of office operation in Greece? If we can do all three of those, the ties between Greece and the United States are going to be unbreakable, and they're going to reach into multiple generations to come.
So, Giorgo, your own 3 minutes, of course, to ask an ambassador to give advice to his own prime minister is rather touching, but I'm sure that having lived in Europe and having tried to teach to Europeans what Greece is about in the pathetic, in fact, years of the economic crisis, you are very good at advice giving. You have the floor.
Well, I think the important things have been said. I mean, opening up. This is it's rather the question of the obstacles. What kind of obstacles? Why can't we create this kind of interaction between this extraordinary potential of the Greek diaspora and Greece in order to promote opening and innovation in Greece? And I think we have to analyze the causes. There are strong resistances in the Greek society, and we have experienced that again and again when Greeks from the diaspora have accepted with a lot of sacrifice to go to Greece to contribute, and they have found a wall of misunderstandings, hostility, sometimes even aggressive behavior. We have to understand why. Again, it's not an issue that we have the time to discuss it, and find ways to overcome them. Some ways may be institutional. I mean, for example, if you invite a Greek American prominent professor to help in the Greek university, well, maybe you have to give him or her very strong guarantees that he will not get into trouble. But I think the most important thing is to develop the debate and also research in order to make people understand all this changing world. It's not easy. And in that sense, I would say that, again, we have to become more extrovert. We are not the only case of people with a diaspora. The last 4 decades, there has been a lot of research and discussion and comparative work about diasporas.
We are reaching our time limit.
I'm finishing. So I think that we have to open up also our minds, not only in the sense that it had been said, but also in the sense of academic research and of communication to the population, so that people can accept the need and the conditions for a better interaction between Greece and the diaspora.
So, a great and an earnest thanks to all of you, both from Economic Publishing. We promise to keep the debate going on, and I'm sure from Delphi Economic Forum. It has been quite a pleasure, and I think quite a rewarding an experience for our audience. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a great day.